Hey everyone, welcome back to Apollo Art Analysis. This episode would be checking out a piece by the multidisciplinary artist known as Jacob Treat. This episode we're going to be talking about mixed media expression, we're going to talk about the idea of visual weight, and we're also going to talk about the idea of whistling past the graveyard. So let's jump right into it. So whenever you first see this work, there's really two main things that are probably going to draw your eye. The first, of course, is going to be this kind of color gradient, and the second one is going to be the placement of elements within the composition. Whenever you first see this work, it's clear that something's not right here, and so what really draws your eye first, of course, is going to be placement in the center. And placement in the center certainly is important as it feels like everything revolves around this center subject here. Of course, it emphasizes the center. And aside from that, we also see our subject defined through primarily a dark and light contrast here. Of course, we see that kind of accented silhouette certainly pops out and draws the eye against that neutral backing. And so in the realm of color, we have this kind of analogous scheme. It does blend together quite nicely, but the impact of that is going to be quite different, right? We have this kind of hazy gradient, and we also have this kind of gradient going towards this blazing left core here as well. All very important when we're looking at this work. So like I said, it is an analogous color scheme, so it is going to blend together quite nicely, but a lot of the edits are going to impact the way that that color kind of conveys itself. So all in all, we do have this gradient here as well. I think this is incredibly important. You start off with this deep blue. I absolutely love that tone. And it kind of goes off into this reddish, pink, maybe even a peach, and then kind of into this white here. It almost feels like everything is kind of being pulled downward. Of course, we'll talk a bit about that here in a second, but this does add a bit of texture to the work. You see, of course, this kind of static haze that permeates almost every pixel of this priceless piece, right? All very important when we're looking at this work. And so, we see our subject's hand here, and it is intact, but to me, I almost saw this as kind of a skeletal hand at first. And so this haze is pretty interesting, right? Of course, like I said, it permeates every pixel here and also creates this effect of like an aura. Of course, you go across the form, the silhouette of our subject's form here. It feels like there's some type of aura radiating off of that. Of course, you have a little bit of that kind of pink haze coming off of that against that dark blue backing. So of course, it looks like it's possessed by this kind of magic aura of sorts, if you guys know what I mean. And aside from that, you look at the static haze. Of course, the title of this work is Everything is Fine. We're going to go a bit deeper in that here in a second, but what I want y'all to look at here, of course, why does this feel unsettling or why does this feel strange here, right? And one of the things that I drew from, if you've ever stood up too quickly or if you've ever felt quite lightheaded, you might see that kind of static haze in your vision where you feel a little bit woozy, right? That's kind of what I see here in a way. You see this static that permeates every part of this composition here, but all in all, that does, I think, convey a little bit to the unsettling nature of the work at hand. I think that's all really important when we're looking at this work. And so whenever I first saw this hand, I believe this hand is intact, but whenever I first saw this, I thought this was a skeletal hand. Of course, the effect of the post edit here in Photoshop, it almost looks as if our subject's hand is only, very thin here, but that does quite extend a lot further. So that edit almost looks skeletal in its final conveyance, at least in my perspective there. And so this also does add a sense of weight to the composition here. Of course, you see, it feels like everything's just being pulled downward towards the descending regions of the spatial composition. This, like I said, it does give us a sense of weight, and it also adds visual energy as well. Of course, you have those kind of vertical streaks being pulled downward. And so all in all, this sense of weight, it almost feels like everything's melting downward as well. It's just being pulled, maybe even decaying downward as well. I think that's a really interesting thing to note here. Of course, we have these very dark, kind of unsettling themes on the work at hand. So something like a decay or a melting away of life, I think could really kind of match the work at hand here. And so the title of this work, like I said, is Everything is Fine. So everything is fine. If you guys have heard of that kind of quote, it's normally used in the context of kind of whistling past the graveyard. And what I mean by that is you're really acting, you're putting on an act or a mirage that everything is okay when it's really not. So we kind of see this within the work at hand. Of course, we have these beautiful analogous colors, so they do work together quite nicely, but everything's being pulled downward. It's kind of decaying and it's kind of edited in that way as well. So everything is not fine. It's being pulled downward, and even holding the apple could give you a bit of symbolism there as well. So all in all, this feels very harsh in its final conveyance. Everything from the static to the sense of weight in the composition to even the possible conveyance of what some people might see as kind of a skeletal hand here. Everything from the blue and red, that static, all in all, really adds to the harsh composition before us here. And so with this in mind, how do y'all feel when you view this piece? What do you see when you view this piece? And how do you think those elements really play into how you feel there? Those are all really important questions when we're looking at this work. So to end it off here, I'm actually going to reference it to some of the other works that I've saw from the original artist Jacob Treat, and then we're also going to kind of look at a little bit behind the scenes and see how this digital rendering program really works. So we're going to do that real quick, and then we're going to hop out of here. All right, so I brought two graphics here to kind of reference today. I actually have a third one we're going to look at there at the end, but I want y'all to just look at these two to begin with here. Of course, those are all relevant to the work at hand. So for example, I don't know if I mentioned, not quite sure if I mentioned this, but this is a digital rendering which was then edited in Photoshop as a kind of post-edit. So it is a mixed media piece, but that is going to start in the digital rendering. So this is a program that we're looking at here, so you can really see kind of how this breaks down, right? This is the final composition that we get here. And if we were to look behind the scenes at, how this is sculpted, how this is positioned within that kind of virtually simulated space, so we certainly see that. You'll also see that kind of metallic shine of the work at hand, right? That adds a sense of texture. It also adds that bit of kind of fluorescence as it shines off of that as well. So that really is what we see within the work at hand. Like I said, this feels like a skeletal hand of sorts, and that gradient and that kind of metallic shine is exactly what causes that effect there. So the interplay of light really makes that impact quite clear. And then on the left here, we saw a different variant, of course, with a different background. Not too many post edits, I don't believe there. So we see a lot closer to the original, of course. The golden metallic hand, we certainly see that here. And then no post edits or any type of color like that. So we see that set against that brilliant baby blue, of course, the perfect neutral backing for that to really pop out. So I wanted to bring these in real quick, kind of show you and reference that. I'm going to bring this out here. And I believe this is a separate piece entirely, so this is not the original work, but it really reminded me, of course, of some of the similar ones, right? You have a hand holding the apple in center space, kind of this metallic shine, that sense of texture there as well. There's also another hand, so there's a sense of kind of passing off there. So all in all, really interesting work. I wanted to bring these in to kind of reference, show you some different perspectives of this singular work here. So we're going to go in, talk a little bit about the original artist, and then we're going to end it off here. All right, so like I said, the original artist is Jacob Treat, and Jacob Treat, was talking to me about, the process and just his general kind of creative endeavors, and he's really trying to learn a lot more in Photoshop as well, of course, 3D art. So all in all, some really nice expressions. This artist is actually a really good digital illustrator as well. So if y'all want to check out, some of the artist studies, some of the artist digital renderings, such as the one before us here, really a lot of different things that an artist has to offer. So if y'all enjoyed the episode today, go check out the original artist Jacob Treat. Always doing some really good stuff in the digital illustration, 3D art, Photoshop, so many different mediums of expression that artist works with. So I hope y'all enjoyed today. Hope y'all learned a little bit more about the original artist, the work at hand, and maybe even some symbolism here. So hope y'all enjoyed. My name is Apollo. This was Apollo Art Analysis, and I'll see y'all on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to support our work directly, please check out our Apollo community tokens. Apollo Art Exchange is an ecosystem of art appreciation which elevates artists each and every day. Thanks for listening.